Okay. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Shapiro.
Hello.
I'm Katerina Erlinger.
Great.
Nice to meet you. Well, first of all, thank you for coming. I'm so glad that the Austin Union is hosting you, and I'm very excited to hear you talk with Curtis Yarvin. I want to start by speaking about a disenchantment with America and with our current system that is very popular and I think has kind of been captured by Curtis Yarvin. There's some that have described contemporary America and the contemporary West as declining or even a declining oligarchy. What do you think about this?
Well, with Brett Kavanaugh, I live on the sunrise side of the mountain. I'm a preternatural optimist. And I'm a double immigrant from the Soviet Union to Canada and then to the U.S. Like most immigrants, I do a job that most native-born Americans won't, defending the Constitution. So, if the entire world is going down, maybe it is, but the U.S. is still the best damn place of all and man's last best hope for liberty. That said, we are at a time of historically low social trust, public confidence in institutions, polarization, all of these kind of negative factors. So we have some issues. I think those are policy problems to be solved. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And certainly, for all of you, the first cohort of students at the University of Austin, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. You're going to go out in the great wide world in a few years, and I think we haven't ruined it all for you.
Do you think any of the problems are like inherent to our structure, inherent to the republic or to democracy, or just because of the people and the policies that we've seen?
I think there's definitely been a breakdown, constitutionally speaking. I'm a constitutional lawyer. There are provisions of the Constitution that have been ignored for a long time, limits on federal power, federalism and separation of powers, a warping of authority going from Congress to the executive branch, explosion of bureaucracy. So we do have some serious structural issues that I'm hoping, there have been green shoots the last few years, and the vibe shift of the last election, I think, will push things in a generally positive direction in terms of that structural warping as well.
Yeah, let's talk about the vibe shift. Obviously, kind of precipitated by Trump, and Trump is like the quintessential. The Trump election has been like the vibe shift. What do you think needs to happen for these structural changes to happen? Is it just passing laws? Like, what does it look like, and how likely is it that it's going to happen?
This time around, things feel very different than 2016, and it might have even benefited him and better governance for America to have the 4 years in between, because he and his team have reloaded. They've lawyered up. All of these executive orders that we've seen, as we're recording this, it's day 5 of the administration. They are very well done. It's not like flying by the seat of your pants like it was 8 years ago. So there's a seriousness of purpose. There's also just, people want normalcy. People want to be able to live their lives without, being canceled for, using the wrong pronoun. And just all of these cultural things have kind of moved us in a direction where I think we're ready for the next big thing. We're ready for morning in America, right? Trump calls it the golden age. That's branding and all that. But it goes more than vibes, I think. If we can harness the potential of American entrepreneurship in so many areas, if we can right the governance ship so Congress takes more responsibility for what it's doing rather than everyone just trying to become a contributor on Fox News or MSNBC. Those are big ifs, but I see good things there.
And then jumping back to the Constitution, one question that I had, especially as a young voter, is what is the design and the vision that the Constitution and the founders had for the office of the presidency, and how has that kind of evolved since our founding?
Our structure and the Founders Project aimed to answer that eternal question of how do you first empower the government to do the things it needs to do. In this case, the goal is to secure and protect our rights and freedoms, to enable human flourishing, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all of that good stuff. So you have a government to have the powers to do that, but then oblige it to control itself, the checks and balances, separation of powers, all of those things. And there's been a breakdown of that. There's been shifts historically. We've never had a utopian system, but our Constitution was meant to have, weights and counterweights and make it difficult to legislate. Only sustained majorities could achieve lasting change of one kind or another. And the presidency, especially since the Second World War, has become an imperial presidency. It's kind of subsumed other parts of the government, so we're almost electing, I'm about to debate Curtis Yarvin, we're almost electing a monarch for 4 years in so many ways. And that's been accentuated in the last decade with Obama's pen and phone, and now we have tweet governance. That's not the way that it's supposed to be.
Why?
Because the executive is not supposed to just rule by diktat, whether you agree with it or not. He's supposed to be the enforcer of laws. Congress passes the laws, the executive executes them. And there's been an imbalance as Congress has punted its responsibilities to the executive branch. Every year we have many more pages of regulations with the force of law than we do actual laws from Congress, and that makes the president more powerful because he can issue those executive orders to rearrange the executive branch, to give orders, to prioritize this enforcement, not that enforcement. That really does look like it's the president governing alone, and that's not what the system's supposed to be.
So we need to rebalance power more towards Congress is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And part of that is the Supreme Court, which has been taking these steps to do its job once and for all, because for many decades, going back to the New Deal, the court just kind of deferred to the political branches, and that has caused innumerable damage.
What if we don't fix the imbalanced power? What if we keep having imperial presidents? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, at a certain point, I suppose you can have a complete breakdown in government and revolution and civil war and all those kind of nightmare scenarios of which we've had, more and more dystopic movies from Hollywood in the last decade along those lines, because people don't feel secure, they don't feel calm, they don't feel that it's part of one American project. I think we're nowhere near that. I mean, like every 4 years, people from both parties say, well, this is the most important election we've ever had. If you go the other way, then America's lost. I mean, if we're at that point, that one election determines whether we fall off the cliff, then we're beyond saving in the first place. So that's all hyperbolic. But Americans tend to muddle through. And as Calvin Coolidge once said, if you have 10 problems coming down the road, well, take a nap, and when you get up, 9 of them will fall by the wayside. So
it seems like
the rest of the world is worse.
It seems like the perception, at least kind of from an outsider and voter point of view, is that Congress does things slow and is very kind of muddy and kind of inefficient, while the president has kind of the power to, have the executive
I mean, that's
power
absolutely
and push
true,
things
but
through.
that's a feature, not a bug.
Okay.
Efficiency is not a high value of our system. The most efficient system is just to have a dictator, right? Or one of Curtis's techno-monarchs, however that would work out, the CEO, king, whatever. That would be very efficient. You give an order, it's done. But what do you sacrifice? You sacrifice people who don't like you. You sacrifice legitimacy, freedom, all of these different other values that we prioritize in our system. So, legislation, the work of governing is supposed to be messy. It's, Woodrow Wilson tried to say that, well, we figured out all the public policy problems that we have. Now we just need an efficient administration. Well, that's even, that's ruled by bureaucracy. That's not even a monarchy or a dictatorship.
I asked Curtis Yarvin this, and I'll ask you as well. What do you think the purpose of government is?
Purpose of government is to allow for people to pursue their vision of the good life.
Awesome. And then I'll end with I wanted to talk about your new book, Lawless, where you talk about the failures to educate America's lawyers. And I'd like you to tell me more about that, and why is that dangerous? What does that mean for America and for the government?
Even though I'm cautiously optimistic about America writ large, both about these political structural issues we've been discussing and in the pushback on the illiberal winds of DEI and related issues, peak woke and all that, within higher education, you don't have as many counterbalances or any counterbalances. And so I'm much less optimistic that things can be fixed. I mean, this is my first time at the University of Austin. I love this, parallel alternative institutions. I'm for all of the above when it comes to this stuff. And that's needed because higher ed has lost its mission. That is, it's moved from education to activism. Its various dynamics have subverted the core mission of truth-seeking and knowledge creation for purposes of law schools. There's a delegitimation of due process, free speech, equality under the law. These are seen in some quarters as being tropes of white supremacy. I mean, it's ridiculous. But we've gotten to a point where lawyers are being trained not in the culture of the legal profession to understand all sides of an issue in order to be able to represent your side, but they're being trained and acculturated to see legal institutions and the law itself as illegitimate because of all of these bad things baked in, structural racism and inequality, and it needs to be torn down and remade according to a different privilege hierarchy or something like that. That is really dangerous because even as we recognize that there's a broad crisis in higher education, if an English or sociology department goes off the rails, that's too bad for humanity. But if a law school goes off the rails, then look, those future gatekeepers of our legal and political institutions are going to be undermining them. The whole foundation on which our society is built begins to crumble. That's a big deal.
Have you seen that? Have you seen those effects already happening, or is this kind of we're bracing for the future?
I've not just seen it, I've lived it. My book, Lawless, uses my so-called lived experience with Georgetown law as a jumping off point for examining the failures of legal education and the legal profession, notably the failure of ideology, the return of critical legal studies and critical theory, which when I was in law school 20 years ago we thought was some weird thing from the 80s and 90s, had been relegated back to its niche, in sociology departments, but came roaring back. Or the failure of bureaucracy, the explosion of non-teaching staff. Whatever is bad about the faculty in terms of discrimination in hiring based on viewpoint, in terms of what courses they teach, whether they indoctrinate, all that stuff. Whatever's wrong there, set that aside. The bureaucracy is possibly even worse because they're not inculcated with academic values. Their professional norms are different, and they're in it to establish a culture, a vibe of this postmodern, intersectional matrices, victimology, harm and safetyism, right? Holding students' hands so they can better process the traumas of, bad election results and things like this. It's really gone off the rails, and not to mention the expense. And our student loan explosion is due to all of this waste of money. And then the failure of leadership. Deans and presidents and provosts, they could fix all of this. This is not rocket science. We don't need to come up with new theories of public policy or educational policy or write new, free speech policies for schools. That's already there. They just haven't enforced them. And we've had a natural experiment since October 7th, since the Hamas attack on Israel, where you see different approaches to enforcing pretty much the same policies at places like Columbia versus University of Florida. So you see, it's a low bar to just apply your pre-existing neutral rules on protecting speech, punishing disruption, all of these sorts of things. And so few educational leaders have done it.
Yeah, and last question, I want to end on this. We mentioned the vibe shift earlier, and it feels like, at least on the right and in conservative spaces, there's this feeling of victory. There's, the Ivies have been changing their tune. Harvard adopted a doctrine of not commenting on political things that don't concern the school. There's been DEI rollbacks all around the country. Is it too soon to celebrate? Are these attitudes too inculcated into the institutions? What do you think that looks like from the inside?
These are all good things, good developments. But to quote Churchill, it's not the end, it's not the beginning of the end, it may be the end of the beginning. All of these executive orders, all of these institutional neutrality positions, they need to be enforced and maintained. Student cultures don't change overnight just by issuing a press release. So I hope that state attorneys general, the Federal Department of Education, keep the pedal to the metal and make sure that we're not just rearranging deck chairs. That Texas passed a law abolishing DEI offices at public schools. Well, these schools should not be able just to rename those offices. I think I read recently some school had renamed it the Office of Collaboration. I guess that's where you put it, the collaborators or something like that. But that's not good enough. There was massive resistance to desegregation orders in the 50s and 60s. There's massive resistance in the educational establishment, and especially in the diversity industrial complex, to what's going on now. We can't rest on our laurels.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing your debate between yourself and Curtis Yarvin, and welcome to Austin.
Great. I'm so delighted to be here, and just it's amazing that this is not just a student-run event, but it's all freshmen, because I know you're the first class, and it's all freshmen. And just what I've seen so far is impressive, and I hope you keep going.
Yes, thank you so much.